So the last 3 weeks we've been talking about the unexpected. And I was giving today's message, what I didn't realize was that something else was unfolding within that message, which I wanted to share. The brief version, you'll be happy to know, with you. This is the Cliff Notes version. I think there's so much power in the birth of Jesus, beyond just the magnificent transformation that the world experiences because of Jesus coming into the world, but even more on a deeper individual level for us, and how we can relate and put ourselves into this story. You see, the Israelites had waited for 400 years to hear God speak to them. And I started to begin to think about what it would feel like to not have communication from God. And I began to think that I would feel invisible. Have you ever experienced in your life a time where you just literally felt like you were invisible? Anybody? I'll admit. That it just seemed like nobody else understood you. They didn't understand what you were going through or what you felt. They tried to, and they might even say, yeah, I understand, but they just really, it didn't feel like they did. Whether it was a friend, a neighbor, a loved one, but just feeling this sense of being invisible to the world around you. Living in that moment for just a few days, let alone generations, experiencing that feeling of just nothing. That there was a relationship that was meant to be there, but almost didn't exist at the same time. Even when they tried to have a relationship with God, it just felt like it wasn't existent. They felt invisible. But then, God breaks the silence with the cry of a newborn baby, which doesn't seem significant at all. He uses a young girl between the ages of 12 and 14 years of old, and he uses a man to be the father of this child who was a blue-collar carpenter. There was nothing spectacular about them. They weren't king or queen. They weren't rich. They were just normal, everyday people back then. Kind of like you and I. And then Jesus comes, and he's born in a cave, in a stable, and he's laid in a pig trough. And we read all of these things, and we know that they're significant in some way, but it's like, how? How are they significant? The only thing that we see that's significant in this story is the fact that Jesus was born. And then I began to think about how often I look at my life, I look at things that have happened in my life, and I say, that wasn't really significant. But then if I try and picture my life without that thing happening, I realize that if I take that out, then that now affects this. And if I hadn't learned that, then I wouldn't be the person I am today. And before long, I find myself realizing that all of those things that I felt were insignificant were really significant all along. You know, when we find ourselves feeling invisible, we have that sense of being insignificant. But yet everything that happens in our life has significance in making us who God created us to be. And so you see, within the story of Jesus being born is literally our story. Our story is woven within God's story. You see, because when we felt invisible, God was really saying, I'm doing something. I'm preparing to do something. You can't see it, but I'm doing something. I'm working. I'm preparing. I'm getting ready for something significant to happen. You just can't see it yet. And so we feel invisible. But you see, we look for what we expect. We look for the things we think should happen. How many times have we prayed to God and asked Him, God, help me do this or do this in my life? And God answers your prayer in a completely different, obscure way that you find yourself wondering, did He really answer my prayer at all? You see, the Israelites, they knew that God had promised that the Messiah would come. And they looked, and they watched, and they looked, and they watched. But when they took their eyes off of the invisible thing, the thing that God was doing, that God was preparing, they missed the unexpected. They missed the significance because they had put themselves above the Messiah. Do you see that your life has so much significance? You know, I know that God is God. And if Mary would have said, heck no, find somebody else, God could have, right? But she didn't. Her significance was found in her relationship with God. The significance that she had on the world, the impact that she had on all of us, because she was willing to carry a child that would be the Savior of the world. You see, I believe one of the things that we dangerously do is we try to find significance within ourselves. We try to find our significance in our careers, in our families, in our possessions. But if we do that, one of the things that we find is that we never fully find that significance that we're looking for. You see, because I believe that our significance was never meant to be discovered apart from God. Our significance. And in those moments where we become visible is when we connect ourselves to the story of Jesus. You see, ultimately, the story of Jesus is Jesus coming as a child. But we stop there. Every Christmas we stop. We've got to wait 3 more months before we can get to the whole point, right? But you see, if Jesus did not come as a child and live as one of us and experience life as one of us, then his death loses its significance. And if he does not rise from the dead, if he stayed in the grave, his death loses its significance. And if he doesn't rise this night, our worship loses its significance. It all comes back to Jesus. So my challenge for you this evening, and as you celebrate Christmas in these coming weeks, as you gather with family, that you would find your significance, that you would see that you are not invisible, that you would also see that your story can be discovered within the story of Jesus. Your life was never meant to be fully discovered apart from him. So my prayer for you and for me is that we wouldn't miss the unexpected. That you would pray a similar prayer to the song that we just heard, where Mary is singing, "Be born in me." You see, Mary realized that this child that she was bringing into the world had more to do with this child than anything that she could have done. That this child that she was bringing into the world was literally coming into the world to save her and to save us. So may we all pray that Jesus would be born in us, that we might find our significance in Jesus unexpected. Yeah. If you'll stand with me, receive this blessing. Jesus, I pray that you would guide our hearts. I pray that you would protect our lives and that we would search for our significance in you, Jesus. That you would make us visible to ourselves. And that we would see within your story is woven into the fabric of ours. God, may you be proclaimed in our lives. May be it your truth and your love that's proclaimed throughout the world this evening. God, I pray that just lighting a candle and blowing it out a few minutes later would not be the end of the light shining in our lives. But Jesus, I pray that that light would penetrate the soul that is within us. And that out of that beauty that you have within us, that you would spring that life into the people around us to proclaim that Jesus Christ is born. that he is king and savior of all.